Okay, so I'm here to discuss one of the biggest shows of the summer, perhaps the biggest show of the summer, with one of my very good friends. He's low-key been begging to get on the pod for a while now.
Okay, let's
Uh,
let's not make me sound
that
like
might be an
that.
exaggeration, but I'm here with Andrew Moore. Andrew, go ahead and give us a little introduction about yourself.
Hello, I am Andrew Moore. I do social video stuff at Bleacher Report in Atlanta, and I watched The Bear, which we'll be talking about, and I loved it. One of my favorite shows I think I've seen in a while. So I was, as Emily said, begging,
Yeah.
screaming, crying on my knees, pleading with her to get on the podcast because I know it's just the place to be to discuss pop culture.
Repetitive text messages, Twitter DMs,
Yeah,
everything. It's been
I
all.
was I was hitting her like her physical inbox with letters. Actually, I was like, "Hey, Emily, dear Emily Leiker."
Your other qualification to talk about this show, kind of, is you are from Chicagoland area.
Yeah, I'm from Rockford, which actually gets mentioned in the show. I don't know if you caught it.
Oh,
They I'm from like Rockford area. They say in the show, if you remember, what's that game, the video game that they play? I forget the
I
exact
don't
name.
know, but I know. Yeah, I know what you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Um, he I think Richie has this line where he's like, "We've got nerds coming in from Rockford for this tournament." And so Rockford is mentioned in the show. So
How far? Like, give us like an explanation of where Rockford is in comparison to the.
so let's say this right here is Illinois.
Okay.
Lake Michigan. So Chicago, as everybody knows, is right on Lake Michigan.
Mhm.
Rockford is a little bit um, to the west and north
Okay.
of Chicago. It's Rockford is pretty close to Illinois Wisconsin border, and so it's about hour and a half into the city. Um, Not too bad, but yeah.
So you like to tell people you're from Chicago, but really,
I've been telling people recently at my work, I'm like, I'm from Rockford because I'm technically from Rockton, Illinois, um, which is
okay, so there's
smaller
Rockford and Rockton.
outside of Rockford. But Rockford is at least like, if anybody knows NBA, Fred VanVleet is from Rockford, which is what I tell a lot of people. I work for Bleacher Report. A lot of people know NBA. And so I'm like, you know NBA? They're like, yeah. And they're like, I'm like, Fred VanVleet's from Rockford. And they're like, oh, word. And I'm like, word.
Uh,
So
okay, go ahead.
yeah, yeah, Rockford, which is mentioned in the show.
You kind of mentioned already what your reaction was to the show, but kind of getting into full on talk about that. I mean, first off, when did you watch? Like, how late to the craze were you? Were you early? Did someone recommend it to you? Like, how did you get into the show?
Let's see if I could actually pinpoint the exact date. I started watching the show, I think Monday, July 25th was when I watched the first episode because I kept seeing on Twitter, I kept hearing about the show and I literally texted my dad. I was like, yo, what's our Hulu login? Because I was bumming off our good friend Jake Fine's Hulu while I was in college and now I don't have Hulu anymore. So I bummed the Hulu login from my dad because I kept hearing, basically, I kept seeing on Twitter everything about this show. I had heard, I actually saw a TikTok about it. That's like anybody that's worked in food service, like you'd love this show, all this stuff about how it was just like good. And I was like, I don't like getting into shows that like have like a fun fact about me, I will never watch Game of Thrones ever in my life. Why? There is way too much for me to ever like consume to even like get to the point of being caught up.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Like,
So I'm like the same. I've been like the same way my whole life. I've been getting so much peer pressure recently to watch that show because the House of Dragons thing is coming out. So I finally watched the first episode last night and
yeah,
I just don't think I can do
My employer, Warner Brothers Discovery, does the show. There are all sorts of promos around my office in my work. I have zero interest in watching it just because like there's so much for me to get caught up on. Like, but I was looking at this, I pulled it up. I'm like, yo, 8 episodes, first season. They're like 30 minutes a piece, like super quick watches. This is something I could like get into. And then I watched first episode and it is just like exactly like what I was hoping for. Just the whole vibe. Like it's very stylized, like film look, Chicago area, kind of reminded, like I moved to Atlanta and I'm like missing like back home a little bit. So a lot of like the little nods and stuff they have kind of remind me of like where I'm from. So it was like, I was like, this show's good. And I watched the whole thing. I was like, damn, this show's good.
Did you binge it? Like, did you watch it all pretty much back to back, or did it take
so it was kind of interesting. So the first night I watched 3 episodes and then I like had some stuff for work, like whatever, life happened. And my mom came into town and I was like, hey, we were like just sitting around one night and I was like, hey, I started this show if you'd want to watch a couple episodes and like try it. And my mom, if you know my mom, like The Bear is like, I would say a challenging show to watch in terms of appreciate. Like it's got, I would say it's like pretty artistic in a lot of senses. And it's also like, it's not like a feel good watch all that. Like it kind of makes you like go through emotions and like think, and like that's what any good show really does. But my mom is somebody that like loves her Hallmark movies, right? Like she loves a nice like easy watch. And so I was like, we watched the first episode and I could tell she wasn't really digging it. And I was like, and I knew it was because like Richie is an asshole, right? And my mom doesn't like assholes. And I knew she just like hated Richie. I was like, you have to watch, because I think is it episode 2 where you kind of get some Richie background where he goes to the store with Sydney.
Yeah, I
I was
believe
like,
so.
so I made her watch that and she was like, it's all right. So I kept making her watch like more and more. And eventually that weekend when she was there, we just watched the whole series. And so that was, I mean, that's how I watched it, is I essentially watched the first 3 and then I rewatched the first 3 with my mom because I was like, try this out. And then I kind of like forced her into watching the entirety of the series. But by the end of it, she was like, this is really good. And she actually made my dad watch it. My dad also doesn't like thinking, but in the opposite sense, he just likes gun blow up, like
Yeah.
very into like that kind of thing. And apparently he didn't like it very much, but it's whatever. He doesn't have good taste.
We're not talking about his takes today. We're talking about yours.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I watched it, if I recall. I did like 2 episodes a night for like a whole work week almost, which was nice because it was like almost a binge, but I wasn't.
So you watched 7 and 8. That must have been an evening.
Yeah, that wasn't even watching 7. Well, I think I got to 6, and at that point I had seen everyone being like, episode 7 is one of the best pieces of television you'll ever watch, like crazy, it's insane or whatever. And so then I saved 7, but I do think I watched 8 immediately after. So yeah, that was an evening for me, and I just rewatched 7. I think it was better the second time around. So
see, I need to actually go back and rewatch. Another thing about me is I never rewatch shows. But this is like very I was consider rewatching because I don't know. It's like it's good enough. Well, when I was watching the first 3 again with my mom, I was like, like you just catch like the show. Well, I think good shows speak for themselves in the level of like detail they have, and like you can tell when something is really well made because of like the minute details that are like packed into every bit of it, where like when you go back and watch it, you get something from it. You notice something small, you know.
Jeremy Allen White in anything before this?
So I know he played Liv Gallagher on Shameless, and I didn't watch Shameless. Mm-hmm. So, but I know he like a lot of people knew him from that. I've like watched like a little bit of Shameless, but I wasn't like, some people were really into that show, like aggressively into it in high school, and I was like,
I didn't watch it in high school, but this past school year, that was like the show that I binged like the entire year long, which then created some very awkward situations. That show is filled with like graphic sex at just
yeah,
like completely random points. So there were several occasions where like I would be in the living room watching it because Caroline had been gone for hours, and literally right when Caroline walked in, it'd be like Lip like fucking some girl like rampant, and Caroline would be like, "What are you watching?"
you're like, oh, porn.
Like, I promise this is not the whole show. Like, there's a lot of other interesting stuff going on. But yeah, so the first thing I like pulled out about the characters is that like Carmi is basically like an alternate universe Lip Gallagher. Like they're like pretty much the same character,
Yeah,
but like Carmi's into food and Lip was into I don't know, like engineering kind of. Like he was into cars, but like in terms of like their personalities, same exact thing. But what did you think of Carmi as like a character? Did you feel like he was believable?
I mean, I really liked him. It lines up. I had literally read some review on The Bear that was talking about basically like him and how this role like fit him well because it like was pretty in line with like other stuff he had played. So that makes sense what you were saying, even though I've never seen him in anything else. Um, I like, I mean, I thought he was very, I think he plays like this very interesting role of like, you kind of see it to me is like a glimpse into like masculinity in a sense as well. Like to me, the show is very much about like masculinity within his own life and like this sense of like his relationship with his sister and like this sense of like having to hold it together and like it's all like very based around his character like feeling like he needs to be this person that he like knows deep down he's not, if that makes any sense. And yeah, like you see that when the guy tells him like you're a piece of shit, like you should like kill yourself, like as he's in this like top restaurant and like he's kind of dealing with that trauma throughout. um and so I think he plays it really well because the show is like so subtle in the way it kind of drops all these things, but also very overt at times. Like it goes like really subtle stuff with his character and how he's feeling and the decisions he's making. And then it's like, oh, here's him like literally setting his apartment on fire. Like he's so like in his head, like sleep deprived, but also like stressed out and like feels like his life is literally going up in flames. Like that is such like just an overt metaphor. And I think fire in general is just kind of like a constant like symbol throughout like the whole film or the whole TV series.
Yeah.
But anyways, way back to the point. I think he plays like a very believable character in the sense like he's an asshole, but you can't help but like root for him. And then you're like, you feel the trauma in terms of like as that slowly gets revealed like over time, like his relationship with his brother, and it like goes like at first you're like, why is he running this restaurant? And you're like, oh, he was this top chef.
Mhm.
Why is his brother left it to him? And then like you go into all this stuff about his brother and you get all these hints like his brother wouldn't let him work at the restaurant, blah blah blah. And that's like I had my tweet about episode 8. The 7-minute monologue is one of my like favorite pieces of like television I've seen recently because all of a sudden it like encapsulates all these feelings and emotions that have been building for 7 episodes are all of a sudden like there, super present, like laid out straight in front of you. Like it's this huge payoff that is so hard to do, but like all of a sudden like this character that you've seen like portray this like masculine presence, like trying to run this restaurant, trying to do all this stuff, be there for everybody, like do all of a sudden he just like breaks down like completely.
Yeah, and we're going to talk about that more extensively in just a second. Going back to your masculinity point, I think it's really interesting to look at the characters around him too in terms of that like theme, because like on one hand, I mean, basically his two closest relationships throughout the show are Richie and then Sydney. I guess you could maybe put his sister in there as well, but I think we see more of him and Sydney interacting in like more meaningful senses than we do him and
Definitely.
his sister necessarily. And so like you have Richie, who's like the definition of an asshole, like just like always talking, like trying to act superior despite having no idea what he's doing, like very, very toxic masculinity vibes coming off of him there. And then you have Sydney, who's a young woman trying to break into a male dominated field. And then you have Carmi in the middle. So I think it's interesting how he kind of like not only like balances the two of them. I think like we often see him trying to like quell them fighting, which they do all the time. I have some great quotes from them fighting in episode 7 that I'm going to bring up later. But I think that's interesting too, and to see how then those three like build in with the rest of the kitchen as well. I mean, you have so many different, very unique characters in that kitchen. I mean, you have like Tina, who's like the old lady who is just working there because she can work there. Like, I don't know. And then you have the baker dude whose name I'm totally blanking on, who's like the
I was gonna bring up, he's like an interesting masculine point too, of like, I don't know, like he's an interesting middle ground almost between Carmi and Sydney at the same time, where he almost plays like masculine, but like in this baker role, which I feel like has a more like feminine undertones to it. And like he just has like a more gentle presence than Carmi does. And like his whole, but like, yeah, there are times like he's, I don't know, it's like super, like when he like tries to take down the stock thing for Sydney. It's also interesting how Sydney tries to like kind of combat, like you said, she's like female in a male dominated field, and she like is trying to, you know, like stick up for herself. She's trying to take this, what is it, like beef stock down, and then ends up spilling it everywhere because
yeah,
she wasn't hold herself, you know.
because sometimes like that stubborn independence and that wanting to prove yourself like gets in your way. And I mean, as a young woman trying to break into a male dominated field like that, that's relatable. Like sometimes you just so desperately don't want to ask for help when you really need it because you feel like you have to just push through it, but then you end up making a big fat mess and spilling stock on the ground and just having to spend the rest of the day cleaning it up. And yeah, so I think that's a good point as well. Okay, let's talk about the 7-minute monologue. Do you have your Twitter thread pulled up on it? Because I do.
Yeah, well, I don't have it, but I can have it pulled up.
Listen, we should read through that, or like give the highlights off of that, if you will.
Yeah,
because I really appreciated this thread when you tweeted it.
Which was funny, like it's very out of the ordinary for me to tweet something like this, but it got good reception, which I was like,
I know, I was like scrolling through your Twitter, I was like, oh damn, it got like 76 likes.
Oh, from a lot of random people that had watched the show. And I don't know, I appreciated it that at least 76 people thought it was a decent take. But I basically talked about how if you've seen the show, I have this still of Carmi, and that you'll recognize the still because basically for one shot, it's 7 minutes straight of Carmi monologuing to, he went to
Al-Anon, Alcoholics.
Al-Anon, yeah, which is like Alcoholics.
Yeah, it's like
anonymous, but like adjacent, like for the people affected, of people with. So he goes to this meeting because his sister, basically a plot point throughout, if you haven't watched the show, is that his sister has been pushing him to go to these meetings, and he finally took up going to these meetings, hadn't talked in one. He had just been like going therapeutically, or hadn't said anything meaningful. I don't remember if he actually says anything up until this point. I don't believe he does.
I don't think so.
Basically 7 minutes, one shot, right? Which, if we think about media today, like TikToks, all I make for my job are TikToks and Instagram videos. It's all like 1 minute. You think about like the average TV or movie, like it's a cut every 2.5 seconds on average. And it's like, we live in this like day and age of media. As somebody that works in media, like I'm trying to figure out how to keep somebody's attention span. And the solution right now is like constant stimulation, like throw as much at them as possible, because like that's just what works right now, right? And so in a media environment like that, a 7 minute continuous one shot, we're talking about like gentle camera sways, no crazy zooms, nothing like that. It's a testament to the fact that like in order to like have that shot work, you have to build your show in a way that like that payoff is so intense that I'm invested for those 7 minutes. Because if I don't care about what he's saying for seven continuous minutes, then the shot doesn't work. But it's a miracle that like I literally glued to the screen for 7 minutes. And I like anybody else with shitty attention spans with TikTok nowadays, like when I watch a show, I'm like on my phone some of the time, you know, like I feel like a lot of people kind of are. It's tough. Like everybody's attention spans are like so deteriorated by like the constant like media that we consume.
Yeah.
So the fact that like seven continuous minutes, and you kind of get for the first time he opens up, like I was saying earlier, you would gotten all these nuggets kind of laid out by, you know, the show and the script about his relationship with his brother and everything. And for the first time, you get the entire backstory about the importance of his relationship with his brother, how he basically like his brother wouldn't let him work. So he was like, fuck you, I'll go like be the best chef I can. And then all this stuff. That, you know, like it hits home, like somebody with like a brother, like you kind of get that brotherly rivalry and that like love he felt, well, almost that kind of like fuck you that he feels when his brother like didn't like reciprocate, like, you know, wanting to like work with him, and he like went out to prove himself and everything. And then he kind of goes and talks about how his brother killed himself and how that impacted him. It basically like brings his entire character into like full context in a way that we hadn't seen yet. And it only works because of how invested you are like within Carmi. And I have this, the monologue is heartbreaking, it's genuine, it's unfiltered, and it feels so real. It's one of these scenes that touches some raw part of humanity that we can all feel and relate to, is one of my quotes that, I mean, I genuinely feel, because that scene, like, I don't know, I get like a little emotional like thinking about it, just because like it feels so like visceral when you watch it. And like that was, as especially as like an actor for Jeremy Allen White, like that was crazy that he, to make me feel like that for like 7 minutes, you know, like props to him. But
yeah, before I have a question for you, but before that, I feel like we'd be remiss if we didn't mention that Carmi's brother is played by John Bernthal, which I think was like one of the biggest surprises of the show. Or do you know John Bernthal?
I don't.
John Bernthal's like a pretty big actor.
Okay.
I know him because he was in Daredevil, the Marvel show. That's like how I was introduced to him. But he's like pretty well known. Like he's pretty high caliber. I wouldn't say he's necessarily A-list, but he might be like A minus B plus list. Like he's not like top tier like household name, but he's pretty famous. Anyway, that's who plays Carmi's dead older brother. My question to you was going to be, how much do you think the pacing of this 7-minute monologue and the fact that it was so easy to pay attention to is helped by the fact that you're pretty much coming immediately off the franticness of episode 7?
It's beautiful. The way the entire show is paced is like leans exactly into that, where they literally overwhelm you, like they make you stressed out as a viewer. You can't help but like feel stressed out watching the show at times, because like you're watching their entire like lives go to complete shambles. Like you're watching everything go to shit. and then all of a sudden it'll be like boom, slow-mo shots, beautiful shots of like cooking. The entire show is like leans so heavy into like pacing, and that's like the most drastic example of that, because I think it starts out the season where you get like small bites of that, but all of a sudden we went this entire what it's like 18-minute one
Yeah.
shot where you watch everybody collectively like lose their minds. You're stressed out watching, you're like, what the fuck is going on? And then it goes from that where, and like that is cut so fast because you're well, not cut fast, but the movement on screen and the way like the camera's whipping, turning, like everything is quick. And then to
Yeah.
go from that drastic like of movement and everything to like stillness, that like I definitely think that's why it works, because your brain needs a break.
Yeah. I mean, and I think it works great too because the show was released as like a binge as opposed to a week to
Yeah.
week. Like I don't think it necessarily would have had the same effect if you watched it episode 7 on a Wednesday one week and then you couldn't watch episode 8 until the next. I mean, like I still think that monologue would be really moving because I do think the writing of it, like I think the writing as well as Jeremy Allen White's acting is phenomenal because like just like the way it's so rambly, like it feels like such genuine speech because I feel like sometimes writers get so in their heads about trying to make a character sound a certain way and like they feel like, oh, it's hard to write true dialogue, like the way we speak to each other, like it's hard to write that authentically because people just try to go for like standard, I don't know, like I don't know, it's hard to describe, but like you don't, it's hard to write good speech. And like this, I was just rewatching it and like the thing that stood out to me is just like he basically just rambles the whole thing. And like, yes, there are sentence breaks and pauses, and like he takes long breaths or like looks up and down from the ground to the audience and the people in the room. But like it feels so genuine. It's not like oh, it's said in the script, look down here, look up here. Like it's him experiencing the frustration and the release of I've been holding this in for so long. I was so mad at my brother. Now I'm finally talking about it. And that like is a difficult thing. But I don't know. Like I just liked how authentic the dialogue is. And like one piece that I really, really appreciated, I don't know why, that just like stuck out to me is like it's in the middle of the monologue and he says, I didn't get into college, I didn't have any girlfriends, I don't think I'm funny. And just the pacing of those 3 sentences, like I rewinded when I was just watching it. I rewound it because I was like, oh my God, like the way he delivers them. And then he like, his voice cracks on the word funny and he takes like a 10-second pause after it. And you can just like, those 3 sentences, I feel like really tell you so much about who he thinks he is as a person and how he's perceived himself for so long that it was just chef's
Yeah.
kiss. Amazing.
I think, yeah, definitely like going off what you're saying, like the monologue feels like it's thinking through itself, which I think is a testament to like the writing in terms of like you can follow like his train of thought in a sense. Like it feels while he's acting, like it feels like you're watching somebody thinking out loud, you know, which is hard to like write down.
Yeah, because like when like I don't know, like even thinking about how we are talking to, like I can hear how I'm talking and I'm like I would never write like that because like when you're writing you know that you have to take specific breaks and you can't have a sentence last for 4 clauses because that would be clunky, but that's how people talk sometimes. So anyway, anything else you want to say about the monologue?
uh
We kind of said it all. I think we
I
hit
mean,
all.
I feel like we really went through it.
Let's
I
talk about, oh,
Oh, no, keep
I was
going.
gonna say let's talk about episode 7 then, because we kind of already you kind of already got into it. This is the 18-minute single shot episode. There's like 2 minutes at the beginning that's like a montage of Chicago, like different clips from around the city. There's like historical clips mashed in there. There's some shots of the characters, and that's all set to Chicago by Sufjan Stevens, which is a great song. I love it. But then it gets to, I think I looked the 2:31 mark, and for the rest of the episode, which is about 18 minutes, all in one shot. I mean, how difficult is that to pull off from a cinematographer like
From
perspective?
cinematography point, almost impossible. And as I was actually reading something that they had about like 2 to 3 weeks to like prepare for, like they decided to make the episode one take 2 to 3 weeks before they shot it, which also is ridiculous in terms of everything like you see on a movie set is like carefully constructed. Anything on TV or film, like you're thinking like lights, like, and you will literally change for 2.5 seconds. A shot will be on screen, like lights will be completely repositioned. You'll get like all sorts of like camera repositions, like reposition things in the background, whatever. Everything, like everybody, I think knows this in the back of their head, but when you like work on like sets and stuff, you really see like the attention to detail is immense in everything people do, especially on like super big sets where you're pouring millions of dollars into a show. And to be able to have 18 straight minutes of like raw, like the camera moving, first the camera has to like, I don't know how much they choreographed, but to like have a cohesive story, like you have to at least generally choreograph like movements of people and where people go, and
Yeah.
have like time marks, and have people like hitting their time marks, hitting like everything they're supposed to be doing, and to like pull all that off for 18 straight minutes is like pretty insane. I mean, we saw why am I blanking on the movie, though, the war movie?
Oh,
um
was it Dunkirk or 1911 that did that?
1911 is all one shot. They had like some invisible cuts throughout where they were able like transition stuff that like doesn't look like a cut but is a cut.
Mhm.
And like if you ever watch any behind the scenes of that, it's crazy how much they had to like do and like choreograph. Like they had people like telling people when to run, whatever. And I'm sure like that was the same way. Now we're talking about like a very cramped space too.
Yeah, that kitchen
So
is tiny that they're having
yeah.
to move around.
And like getting all the movements right, I think is a testament to like actors as well, like to know. I'm sure a lot of like improvisation almost goes into those,
Mhm.
like one that entire episode, because like 18 minutes you have to be like doing all sorts of different stuff continuously. But also like, I mean, planning where that camera goes for 18 minutes is super important, and like it's almost documentary in a sense, because like you obviously have to plan, but I'm sure like the cameraman also is just kind of like feeling things, because sometimes you're like filming something and you just do what like feels natural.
Mhm.
um but yeah, crazy that they were able to pull that off.
Yeah, well, and just like the whole way the episode is like structured, and like the individual plot of the episode and how it ties into the larger plot, like it just builds so perfectly throughout the episode, because you start with this very calm montage set to a very soothing song, and then it's okay, you're coming in and they're in like a happy mood in the kitchen, like Ibra, I think is his name, is reading the review, which then obviously leads to, well, the guy reviewed food that's not on their menu. So then Carmi finds out about Sydney making this risotto. And then it just like starts to build. You bring Richie in, and Richie's, of course, like talking shit to Sydney. You have Richie being stabbed, which made me
Rich, that
so hard because he just gets right in the ass.
that's like the best part. My other favorite is, because you just can't help but feel so bad for him. You watch episode after episode of Marcus trying to get his donut right, and he comes up with this beautiful donut, and he's like, I forget his exact line, but it was something about like the dough. He's like, I've been trying to make like a flour based, but I should have been doing cake based the whole time. And then Carmi's just like, are you fucking kidding me right now? He's like, are you kidding me? He's like, is this a joke? And then like smacks it out of his hand, and you're like, oh my god.
Bad because
I
you
feel
simultaneously
so bad for him.
feel bad for him that that has happened, because like you said, you've watched him throughout this entire show try and perfect this, and it's clear that it's something he's really passionate about. but at the same time, you're like, why
At the
are
same
you
time,
doing
you're like, Marcus, are you? He just zones in so hard. He gets in the baking zone, man.
any like anyone who has ever worked in a kitchen like knows, like even if it was just from working at Harold's, I know that like if someone was doing that shit in our kitchen while it was rush hour, I would be like, what the fuck are you doing? You worked in food service too, right?
Yeah, I worked at an ice cream shop
Yeah.
that was, I mean, we got busy. The show reminded me of that because I mean, it was homemade ice cream in a small thing in my hometown that like got super, like we'd have a line out the door and around the corner on like some nights, and like same kind of vibes in the kitchen of people just all on top of each other and stuff. But yeah, if somebody was like just doing whatever during a rush hour, that
It's like, and it's like fine that he wants to do that, just literally not in that instance. Like it's not even just like the normal chaos of a kitchen that you're dealing with, because there's like pretty much no time that a kitchen isn't at least slightly chaotic in like food service, I feel like. But then you have like the whole situation where they've just opened up the to go orders, the like pre-sale stuff, and the receipts just keep printing, and then they have
it's so good.
it's so good, and they have the extra person in the kitchen because Tina has to bring her son,
Yep.
grandson, Louis,
We
because
got like suspended.
it's just
It's like so funny too.
it just comes out of nowhere. You're like, why is this person here? You got the stabbing in the ass.
The stabbing is the best part for
Yeah,
sure.
it is the best part. And it's funny because like
But
there's,
he's just matter of fact, like, I just got stabbed. I just got stabbed.
which is funny because he's so dramatic at every other point. So that I feel like that's how you know that he's actually phased by what's going on, is because he doesn't dramatize it. Like, because even like 5 minutes earlier, he is like talking with Sydney. They're out by like the front counter. I don't remember how they get on the topic, but they're like arguing about something. And she's like, oh, well, your friends always come in here and order one sandwich for the four of them, don't even eat it, and then leave or whatever. And he goes, what? So this is a war on poor people? And she's like, no, it's a war on you shutting the fuck up, Richie. And like, it's just like, he's like the classic, like, take everything and blow it up to 10 times.
Yeah.
10 times what it should be.
Well, when he gets stabbed, I mean, like, they have the whole like health inspector episode, right? Where they get, and then all of a sudden he gets stabbed, and then you watch him, he's in the kitchen, and he literally walks over, like pulls down his pants and like pulls up his underwear, and you see the stab wound.
He's literally bleeding on the floor.
Yeah.
They're like cauterizing it, and he says like, oh, tell me about, he asks Ibra, who's doing the cauterization, he's like, tell me about the factions. And Ibra starts like talking about his home country's government. And then he's like, and 2 helicopters. And Richie goes, is this shit fucking Black Hawk Down? And Ibra's like, Black Hawk Down, yes. And you're like, that's just such a random piece of dialogue, but it like just fits the episode so perfectly. I don't know, but
Just pure chaos.
yeah, great times all around. Any other episodes that really like stood out to you, or like individual scenes from some of the other episodes?
I was crying laughing like beside myself when they put the Xanax in the punch. Like that. What episode? Episode 3, episode 4.
Yeah, I was gonna say the whole like that whole episode.
The whole like, well, and his sisters, like his brother-in-law is such a funny character, because like his brother-in-law only like wants the best for Carmi, is like so supportive, is like at this party, like they literally warn each other. I think his name's Phil.
Yeah, that sounds right.
They're like, oh, Phil's here. Like they let everybody know, and then like some dude's ripping Carmen. He's like, this guy was like the head of the best restaurant. And Carmen's just saying like, yeah, I mean, like it's kind of like talk your shit, Phil, but also like, Phil, can you? And he's like hamming it up with them, and then he's so funny because they got to take him home because he got like took the punch. He's like, I feel a little tired. Then you like, it's so funny to like everything goes quiet, and they look out over the kids.
They're all asleep.
I think Richie's like, huh, that's weird. Because all the kids are passed out. You have the uncle that like Carby tells him he put the Xanax in it. He's like, actually, I'm kind of into it. Like that whole episode is so funny. Even the start where Carmy and Richie are arguing over the giant inflatable hot dog, and he's like trying to put the shirt over it, but the shirt is way too small to ever fit. So they end up like they pop it. They have another one in the back that Richie goes to get, and then they showed at the party, and they literally like just duct taped a shirt like onto like just his chest, like right here, like the shirt is like that big on the hot dog.
Good
Yeah,
stuff. It was a good episode.
That's one of my favorites for sure.
I also did find I liked how the season ended with the money and the tomato can.
I was gonna bring that up. I mean, the letter of like, well, the letter almost makes you cry when it's like, first of all, Richie's an asshole for not like giving him the letter when he first found it, but it shows like some development of his character that he like eventually gets around to like plopping it down on his desk.
Yeah.
And then the like, I love you, dude, let it rip, which he had talked about let it rip as like,
talks about it in the monologue, right?
Monologue as like this thing, like him and his brother, like it's a saying they kind of had. And so like that makes you like cry. And then he finally gives the family recipe for spaghetti, which is this constant the theme throughout the film of Carmy asking like, why are there so many fucking tomato cans? Like this spaghetti is like this big thing where Richie wants to keep the spaghetti on the menu. Carmy's like, it doesn't fit the menu, like all this shit.
Also, like, who goes to a restaurant that serves sandwiches and orders spaghetti?
And so like it's a deciding moment, and I think it's episode 1. It's the end of episode 1 where Ricky goes, like they have like all these like nerds trying to play this video game tournament, and he's like basically like, you don't run this, I do, like you're gonna go to the back and like make that spaghetti because like this is what it's gonna take to feed all these people. And at the very end of the episode, I don't know if you remember, but he like throws the tomato can away. Yeah, and now all I'm thinking about now is like that had 10 bands in it, that tomato can.
Yeah, which like how did he get that in there? Like what, how was he doing that?
What was the manufacturing process?
Sealing them back up, like that's not like a classic like sipping, like that's not like a refilling a water bottle with vodka or like
that's on like some drug dealer like smuggling shit.
Yeah, like that must take serious like heavy machine, like I don't know, like an assembly line at the very least. Like that's not a one-man job. Like
my question, I don't know, I still like why in,
yeah,
like you couldn't have just like put it in the attic,
hide it literally anywhere else, or like put it in a dry food, like why didn't you put it in a pasta bag or something like that? Or like our container.
The visual of them opening the cans collectively and pulling out the money is so funny. And then when Sydney walks back in, and they're all just like opening tomato cans, and she's like
making a
they're like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Get to work. Like, are you gonna help us or what? And she agrees to help.
Yeah, thank God. Now we get season 2. Who knows when?
Season 2, where the end of season 1, they shut down the restaurant and are reopening it under. I mean, they're opening a new restaurant essentially, but like
in the same location. Yeah.
Same location.
Under.
Which I knew it was going to be called the Bear. Come on now.
Yeah, that was obvious.
My mom's like sitting there watching. She's like, I wonder what they're going to call it. I'm like, Mom.
I will say the first time around, I wasn't paying attention to what their last name was because most of the time they don't use it. So I didn't realize that the Bear was also a play on their last name.
I got a question for you.
Oh, okay.
Film critique, because I'm still not sure what I make of it, to be honest.
Mm-hmm. Oh, the bear on the
very opening
on the
scene.
bridge.
Yeah, the very opening scene.
Well, okay, so I'm assuming that's the State Street Bridge, right?
Yeah.
Which is where his brother killed himself, we learn. So I read it as like a.
I didn't even make that connection. This is why you have the podcast and I don't.
So we see it at the beginning of the show in the very first episode, and it like happens, and then Carmi like wakes up and it's like a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Versus at the start of episode 8, you see it again. I literally just watched this and I'm trying to think of what you see it, and it has just like a different tone to it, I feel like, but you see the bear on the bridge again. So I think it has to do like it's like this emotional trauma that he feels from his brother committing suicide, and so like on that bridge, which again it gets to the like obvious symbolism but like also not obvious thing, because it's literally, I mean, their last name is Berzado, and you have a bear in a cage on the bridge where his brother committed suicide. Like, I think it's definitely like a metaphor for like his trauma, or like a way of him visualizing his trauma, which is also why it's in a cage when we see it, because at the beginning of the show, he's not ready to talk about it. Like he can't, and he also doesn't want to let any of that emotion out.
Yeah.
And so like I think the bear is supposed to be like that trauma of losing his brother. Yeah.
I like that.
That'd be my guess.
Damn, we're way
over. Hit me from the start. Like definitely when I watched the first episode, I was like, what the fuck is going on? Like, why is there a bear in a bridge?
See, I had my analysis, like I've like thought about it, and I didn't make the connection towards his brother, but I was kind of along the same sense in terms like this is like his inner trauma in a sense of like him confronting, like he's all of a sudden like thrust back into this place of his like hometown and everything, and like even though like as everybody knows, like places are filled with emotion and a lot of times like trauma.
Yeah.
He thrust back into that like place, which is why I think like everybody is so apprehensive about him even like working there. Like his sister hates the place, right? She won't even like, she doesn't even like coming by or anything, but he's like so determined to like fix it, because I think it's like to him like an extension of his brother, you know?
Yeah, well, and like I mean, in a sense, that restaurant is a cage itself to their family, because they're too deep in financial debt to do anything about getting rid of that space, but they also like don't have the money to like make it fully work, at least not for
uncle buy it and turn it into an Applebee's or whatever.
Exactly. So like that, I think that's, yeah, I mean, I think it all ties back to like the idea of trauma or whatever, but you can just read it a lot of different ways. So
I think, I mean, the show is all in all like incredible. Everybody should watch it, but like it is like a good look into trauma and how people like deal with it. I mean, you even see how Richie, as much as an asshole as he is, you see him like dealing with the trauma in like his own ways, and like you see like why he's the person he is, and like a lot of it is like how people deal with, how Carmi especially deals with trauma, but like everybody in the restaurant, even like Tina talks about how she was close with what's his brother's name? Why am I blanking on that?
Hold on, I have it pulled up. Mikey.
Oh, Michael, yeah, Mikey. And Tina talks about how she was close with Mikey. Like everybody besides Sydney knew him, you know, and like you kind of see how they're all very much a show about like the processing of trauma, but also like creating, like turning a new leaf on life.
Yeah. Well, not like everyone can have trauma from the same event, but in a different way, because I think part of like Richie's trauma and why he deals with it the way he does, which is through being an asshole, which not the best way to deal with trauma, if you ask me. is because like he was by Mikey's side for so long after Carmi left that like he feels slighted by the fact that Carmi was just able to come back in
Yeah.
after Mikey died and take everything over. Like he probably feels like he was robbed of something. I mean, I think we get a little bit of that at the beginning where he's like, this is my restaurant, and Carmi's like, fuck no, it isn't. But I mean, I can understand why Richie would feel kind of entitled to it if he had been there the whole time managing and picking things up for Michael, albeit doing a pretty shitty job, but still.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I mean, the way Carmi deals with it is it's a lot of confusion over like why now to have the restaurant when he like wanted to help his brother the whole time. But I think he also feels a lot of like guilt associated with his brother's death, undoubtedly, of like feeling like he wasn't there.
Yeah.
And that goes back like Richie, like, because he wasn't there, you know?
Yeah.
But he feels that. And so he's almost overcompensating throughout the show. It like the whole show, like that's why I think it's so great, is that it's like so well thought out in the way like all these characters interact with each other. Mm-hmm. And like they're very like complex relationships. Like it's not a lot of like, oh, TV relies on a lot of like, I feel like simple relationships and like between characters, but these are like really like trauma ridden versus like all this. You have the implication of like young Black woman trying to break into like male dominated field with like, you know, like everything that entails versus like Tina is like an older Black woman with like in her relationship with Sydney. And like it's all these like very intense kind of like subject matters that are like done very well, you know, and all this like, I don't know, blending of like culture, and everything they do with Chicago is great. And anyway, just 10 out of 10. Great show. Yes, chef.
Yes, chef. And yeah, I will be watching a second season of it for sure. I mean,
yeah,
would have been satisfied, I think, with one season, but second season will be good. Okay, before we end, I'm going to talk about some other like summer content in the intro and outro of this pod, and I'm curious if you have any other favorite pieces of content from this summer.
Any other favorite piece of content?
Movies, albums that
does it have to be current, like stuff that came out this summer?
Preferably yes, though I'd be interested to hear what you discovered this summer that wasn't current.
Well, I watched Moneyball for the first time.
I haven't seen it. That's what I haven't seen.
In 2011 or whatever, and that was pretty good. Let's think. I got some music definitely for you. I don't know about, I'm trying to think any movies I've seen recently that have been great, but nothing has really been standing out.
Jake's usually my go-to friend for movie talk.
Yeah. He's a culture kid.
A movie fiend.
Here, let me think. I'm going to my playlist right now.
Okay, perfect.
I'm on Spotify.
I was gonna say, you're probably honestly more tuned into a lot of the mainstream music stuff that happened this summer.
Music stuff is like, yeah, most of what I like keep up with, at least like on a day-to-day. I mean, Lil Uzi dropped like a SoundCloud album that was like fire. It's on Spotify now, but it was originally on SoundCloud. He's just kind of like going back to his roots, you know. Sure. Redvale, he's like 18-year-old artist, completely produced and like did everything on his like debut album. It's called Learn to Swim. PG Baby, if you need a song off of it, incredible. I mean, Central C having quite the summer, got the Lyrical Lemonade co-sign with the Cole Bennett video. Everybody knows Steve Lacy having
I have listened to the Steve Lacy album, and I listened to the Montel Fish album.
Well, Montel Fish, also great.
Really sad though. Really fucking sad.
Really sad. I think Midwest, spelled Midwest, but the E is an X. He's got some fun like alt pop hip hop kind of vibe. And he's dropped some singles that are pretty solid. That, you know, I think he's dropping an album soon. We got Fred again having the summer of his life. That Boiler Room set. Turn
I
on the lights.
I have like no idea who half the people you're talking about are.
I mean, it's been a pretty decent summer. I can't go without mentioning the Drake album, which if you don't like the Drake album, you're wrong. And you're pretty close-minded towards music, because I appreciate what Drake does, and that's like experiment, you know. He kind of does what he's feeling. The whole album, like, when have you ever seen a mainstream rapper drop a house album? Like, Kanye's experimented with house because Kanye is from Chicago. Shout out Chicago as the home of house music.
Oh wow.
House music. I don't know if you knew that. So Kanye has played around with some house in the past, but like, I mean, for Drake to go do that and then to drop like Jimmy Cooks on the end of the album as like
a good song. That was one of the songs that on my first listen I did like.
Well, see, and that's, you're supposed to like it because that song's in there as like a fuck you, I can do this whenever I want. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's the album theme, but it's just kind of like showing you like I can literally pull this out of my ass whenever I want. This album is what I wanted to do, but like, here's this for you peasants.
Okay, maybe I'll revisit the Drake album. I don't.